Renee.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about how not to play the victim.
Good
So I'm trying to say that as kindly as I can, because if you have been abused or you have gone through something, whether you were robbed at a store, you were the victim, or you were sexually abused, and those are the people that usually we're talking to, you're the victim in that circumstance. And so that is true. But what I'm talking about is how to not play the victim going forward in life. And first I want to talk about the roots. So when we were victimized, we may have had betrayal of trust.
Sure.
And so now we aren't going to be so trusting towards people. We did a video on that one. Past trauma will come in, and people struggle with PTSD, which is the post-traumatic stress disorder. And certain memories might come up, and that might trigger them to go back into being a victim when they're actually not being a victim at that time, but they're struggling with something. It's at the roots and it needs to be dealt with. That's why it's popping up. It needs to be dealt with. Being manipulated into taking on the victim role. Some people want you to stay the victim. I know that sounds horrible, but that could be at the root of during the time and after that you were victimized. Then afterwards, everybody came in and there was so much attention. And then every time somebody introduced Renee to somebody else, they would say, "This is Renee Rivera. She was sexually abused when she was a child." Always, continually. And that would click in your mindset at that time. It would keep pushing you back down to the being this victim, where now you're a victor, you're an overcomer. And dealing with the root of that, if that makes sense. And developing that mindset when somebody keeps treating you that way, you end up being a codependent. That's a struggle bus. You don't want to get on there.
Yep. So much can be involved with that one. Absolutely.
When you talk with somebody that's still in that victim mentality and you're going, why are they still there? There's some usual signs that you could see, and it's more of like a belief system they have. And some of these I could say I had to grow in maturity, and I had to open my eyes further to what the Word of God had to say to help me break free of the lies that I was still in that place, because I wasn't in that victim place. But when bad things would happen, all I could think of is bad things happen, and they're going to continue to happen, and they're going to happen to me. That was a belief. It was a belief I had. And that's pretty depressing, by the way.
But it's truth. It's truth that we think at that time when we feel we're still the victim. We feel like we'll always be the victim. And life is always going to be cruddy and never serve us well. And
but I went on for years with those beliefs, which was so sad because it really did rob me of a lot of life. So thank God I'm not believing that way anymore. But it took others to come into my life to break that down for me to see the truth. And that nothing's ever my fault. It's the world's fault, if that makes sense. I take no responsibility. Nothing's ever my fault. No point trying to fix this or work it out or go get counseling, because I'll always feel this way. No sense working on it. No sense reading the Bible, trying to find strength in there, because I'm never going to find it. Very negative.
I'm always going to be labeled. I'm always going to be this person.
Absolutely.
They label themselves and keep the label kind of alive.
As truth.
Yeah.
Now, I know we are going to the extreme end, but for those who have been victims, I'm sure there's a flavor in there, a little piece that they can taste.
Yeah, I can probably feel it a little bit. Yeah.
Always goes for the sympathy or attention card. So if all of a sudden everybody's getting together at Christmas, but this person is usually just sitting there and they're real reclused, that type of thing, because they've chosen not to go ahead and get help and all the other, and they've chosen, but it's so much better because I get sympathy. People pay attention to me. This is my way in the world. And I like to have this attention, but they don't realize how much it's pulling them back and how much it's really taking energy from others, which they don't need to do.
It's unhealthy. It's definitely
unhealthy.
I've seen that quite a bit too. Just that one person at the party or one person at the gathering, I call it the circling the wagon again. It's almost predictable. And I don't mean that to make fun of. Yeah, I don't mean that to make fun of, but yeah, because they're not dealing with it, they bring it with them. And then that is the topic instead of really what it's the birthday party or it's Christmas or whatever it is. The celebration is supposed to be or the person who is celebrating of that day, but the attention tends to, well, the woe is me person, that person that wants to continue in that victim mentality. They try to draw that attention back to them, even if that's not the purpose of the event.
Yeah. Well, and we're not saying that somebody who just was a victim. We're talking much time has gone by and they're still in the same place they were when the event happened. There's a huge difference.
And not choosing to grow
into their healing. Absolutely.
Exactly. I'm like, what's that word? To grow into the healing and get the work done that needs to be done.
And it's work. Absolutely. Yeah. Makes excuses. Well, I can't because because of this, and I can't because of that, or just constant excuses. And that's what they are, and that's what everybody's hearing. And eventually, in the beginning, they have great empathy, they have great compassion. And as the years go on, they just don't come around as much, or they don't sit next to you at the party to talk with you because they're tired of hearing it, that you haven't grown, that you haven't done, that it's always poor you and that always happens to you. And that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth is the negative. So, and they don't like also hearing the negative bad talk. A victim will start bad talking themselves right away. Right away. It's so automatic. And the self-sabotage, which we've talked about before, that comes hand in hand once enough bad talk is there, because the belief system has changed. And then the self-sabotage just pulls on right next to it, attaches itself like a trailer to a truck, and is hooked on real well. And it needs to be broken off. The other
people don't enjoy doing that.
Oh gosh, yes, yes.
Because they've heard it for more than once, and probably have heard it for many, many years.
Yes. Another thing is not trying to solve things. A little interest in changing. So it's been, I don't know what the time frame has been, but I'm going to say years, and little interest in changing. Happy in this spot of wallowing in their own sorrows. They love to wallow in their own sorrows, and they love to pull you in to that area and maybe even hear a little bit of your wallowing, but they won't admit that that's what they're doing. A lot of times in the beginning, they're blind to it, but eventually, even if somebody says, well, you need to think more positive, and in their brain, they're like, there's nothing positive. You know what I'm saying? They can be anger, or it can be, I just don't have a positive thought in my head. Well, then you need to reach out and get some help with this. But they're happier wallowing instead of going out and.
Well, it's familiar too. So it's easier to stay in what you know than to try to get the help that's necessary.
Yes. Which leaves them easily frustrated, resentful when others are happy. So there could be a lot of people around, or a brother all of a sudden gets a raise at work. They're not happy for them. Or they just had a baby type thing. they just struggle and become resentful because they are so happy and they are so miserable. And they have so much hopelessness. And then eventually they feel like no one cares. And it's not true.
Yeah.
So many people have tried to reach in. So many people have, but that no one cares. Above all, God cares.
He does.
He cares for us. He loves us so much. And if they are trying to fix it, they fix it with being angry at others. Or they isolate themselves because they'd rather just be lonely. Again, it goes back to the wallowing, and eventually that will just lead down a road of depression that they can't figure out how they got there.
It sounds like they're replacing one habit with another coping behavior or habit.
They could have before been living a happy life. Then they became this victim of sexual abuse, and a mindset changed during that time so quickly. And it went down this road, and they just didn't receive the help they needed, but they still can get it today. It doesn't matter if it's 20 years, 40 years, 50 years. They can still receive help today. God is waiting to work with them, love on them. And yes, it will take some work on their part, opening their hearts up more than anything, being willing to trust again. Tough stuff.
Yeah, that's huge.
So things we could do to help. How's that? We could talk about the positive there. Asked if you could chat with them on things that you've noticed. So if you see somebody that's possibly in this place, ask if you could chat with them on things that you've noticed. And if they say no, then be polite and say, okay, no. And if they say yes, say, it seems like every time we get together, what I'm hearing first off is how bad things are going. You're complaining. It's sounding like complaining, how bad your husband is, how bad your children are. And I know there's so much good going on. There is good in there. And so just different things, but being able to chat with them and then listening to what they say. You know, people don't know that they have this bad habit, that they're doing it. And if I sat down with you, Renee, saying, you know, every time I ask you how you're doing, and you start off with the negatives right away, but never get to any positives. And it always is a struggle for me to say, but doesn't that mean you guys can get a new car? Yeah, but I really loved that car and I never wanted to get rid of that car. And you know, I say, that's true. And you could become so comfortable in it. But anyways, that type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And then go ahead.
I think it's easy to run into folks that, or at least I know I have, run into folks, it's easier for them to respond to negative than a positive.
It is. I really do.
No matter if you're a victim or not, it's easy for that to just spew out of your mouth, just the negatives versus the positives, unless it's just that blank statement of, I'm fine. But I've run across many who are formerly sexually abused, now an adult, you know, and that mentality is still there. It's just, it's not just a crap talk on themselves, but it's just everything around them. But it does take effort to listen when it's always a negative, but it also takes even more effort to be the one to ask the question with the spin, like you said, the open-ended question, instead of this, well, why is everything always so bad every time I talk to you? It's got to be an easier way to ask that.
Well, those who have been sexually abused also have lost they did have a boundary, but when they became this victim, their boundary was broken. And so sometimes this is the reason why you'd ask if you could talk with them about, you know, it seems like these different things are happening and you're not happy with it. Have you ever thought about setting boundaries? Because sometimes it got thrown away. They felt it was trampled on and will just always be trampled on. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So
the mindset, and I'm not
yes.
saying in a negative way, but it's once it's been trampled on, it also steals your hope. There's a hopelessness that is given along with the sexual abuse. There is that mentality and a hopelessness, and that does carry through until we hear the truth that hope can be had and that good can be done, and that, oh, we can own our boundaries again. Because sometimes we feel, well, we just got robbed and we're going to just keep getting robbed, that people are just going to keep taking, so sometimes many don't know until we're told that it can be different. You know what I mean? It's like we're kind of put on a track, and that's all the track that we know.
That's why it's so important to offer. Again, it was offer and see if they say yes. So you can help them find the solutions. And if they say no, just back off. Say, okay, well, when there is a time where you'd like to talk about it, I'm here.
Yeah. And pray for them. Maybe not in front of them, but pray for them to have the receptiveness to receive it.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they don't know they're missing the.
Yes. To encourage them to take steps forward.
Yeah.
To encourage them to take the steps forward. And when you do that, like you always say, it's brave to move forward.
Indeed.
To sit there in the same spot where you think you're safe and the other, that's not bravery.
No.
But yes, it is risky, but baby steps are good.
The other way feels safe, but it doesn't always mean it is safe. It doesn't always mean.
No, it usually means you'll end up spinning into lonesomeness and depression.
Yep.
So what if that was me? Okay. What are things that I can do to stop being this victim? Because if I'm telling myself trash talk constantly, because that's part of being a victim, is sometimes they'll replay what they heard from somebody who's abusing them and or from others and take it on them. So it doesn't even have to be from the time they were abused, but they hear it from others and go, yeah, that's me. I'm this, these negatives. To overcome that and have compassion on myself and talk kindly to myself. Self-kindness. It's huge.
Yeah. That's another thing many don't know they can do.
And that's not the same as spoiling a child. So in other words, I could talk self-kindness to myself and say, you know what, this happened to me, all this kind of stuff. But there's a point where you could be too kind, like spoiling it. You could be kind to a child, then you could spoil a child. So I'm not talking about spoiling. I'm talking about that self-kindness and compassion.
Right. Yeah. Not the going out and deserving or going out and splurging and
because of this.
Yes.
I get this. That's not it. And then take responsibility. I need to start taking responsibility, ownership for things that happen. Good and bad in there, but mostly it's bad that usually gets rejected out. Stop blaming others.
Or avoiding it. Fess up. Take ownership.
But as in, well, I can't do that because, and they'll just say, I can't do that. So that, in other words, I've shut it down. When you say, well, how about you go ahead and join us for this event? Well, I can't do that. My husband's working that day. He has the car. See how I didn't even leave an option. I know. And so you come back with, well, we have plenty of people who live in your area. They can pick you up. No, I can't. No, that's not possible because they may not want to leave when I want. I will constantly. And I'm blaming my husband, by the way, because he has the car and he has to go to work. There's other ways. I could take my husband to work and then I use the car and then I could leave on my own. But because I've stopped it at that place for no working it out. Yeah.
Playing victim of not having a car.
I want to stay in that victimhood place. Practicing
Yeah.
no. We talked about boundaries before. Practicing that no.
That's huge.
Yeah. Forgiving yourself and others. So I would struggle with that. I don't know if you struggled at all with forgiveness.
For a little bit of time. It's not an issue now, but I know others in my life that struggle with it, to the point of it becomes a bitterness, and they have to keep taking it to the cross. Those that deal with it take it to the cross and are working through it.
Yes.
Even another person getting counseling, because forgiveness was really difficult because of the pain that another person had caused.
Sure.
But then I know others who forgiveness is rarely practiced, and it is definitely affecting things. We'll just say that.
Well, because if you don't forgive, eventually bitterness starts taking root.
Yeah.
So it's easy to see when you're talking with somebody if they have unforgiveness in their heart. It's too easy to see, unfortunately. Yeah. I struggled with that during my early years, for sure. And learned that I was just carrying too heavy of a load if I could just forgive. And it started out with me saying, well, God, your word says for me to forgive as you've forgiven me. I don't know exactly how to do it. Obviously, you're just telling me to forgive. So I will say, I forgive this person and what they did. And I pray that you go ahead and somehow take that off my shoulders. Well, I remember doing that. And the next day I woke up and I still felt it there. And I was like, okay, God, I forgive. And it was the next day and the next day. And eventually, after several months, I didn't wake up and say it anymore. It wasn't there. And when I thought of this person, there wasn't a bitterness growing. And he did take it. I just don't know what exactly that moment was. But he did, because I'm able to love this person, even though this person did this to me. That wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. And it's only through Christ that it is possible. Yes. Because I know when I had the sexual abuse, and I remember saying, oh yeah, I forgave them. And then I'd hear about someone else getting hurt and, or another situation, and it would just stir back up. It's like, well, apparently I didn't forgive, And I remember when I just took it to God, I'm like, it doesn't matter what that person does. I cannot allow this to have hold of me anymore. And my lacking that forgiveness fully and giving it to Christ, there was like an oppression on me. There was a weight. I just kept hearing, just this weight that I couldn't kick until I said, Lord, you've got to fully take this away. Relieve me of this. And I'm not doing it because it's a gift I've got to give to somebody. But what I've learned is it's something I've got to do between you and I, Lord. So take care of this, please. And I do give it to that person, even though I don't understand it. And I remember that day. I remember walking outside, and I still remember the tree outside, even when I did it, and calling my mom and telling her, guess what? I have fully forgiven. And I can't tell you the weight that this has taken off of me because I have fully forgiven now. Not like I used to. There's one, like I said, before I had tried, but it wasn't 100%. And that one was. That was I'll call it my 100% weightlifting. Yeah. So my perception of that person has changed. My hope for that person has changed. My prayers for that person has changed. Even my own attitude has changed. And my understanding of forgiveness has changed because I felt it and experienced it really working.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. It would be important for me to find out what's the root, what's making me feel this way. So if I'm having a victim moment, I want to wallow in my sorrow, or if I want to, whatever it is, or why? Ask myself the question, what is making you feel this way? Is this truth or a lie? Does this line up with God's word, or does it not?
To add to that, you were talking about that. I remember after not even the sexual abuse feeling like a victim, but feeling like a victim with my health, being attacked by mold, and I remember moving to this new town and just wishing somebody would hear my story. And I remember being in that moment of wallowing. So I can very much relate to feeling like the victim, because I felt like one. But my why at the time, don't know why I'm having the tears, I just needed somebody to listen and to step up and help, because I didn't feel like somebody was listening and doing more of what I needed for me, because I couldn't do it for myself. So I remember being in that place and having to step back. Dang, Renee, I was starting to come across as a whiner versus here's my story, here's how I victored out of it. It was a moment I caught myself whining about the issue, the incident, and how I felt. And I had to do I really had to do a self-check in that moment. Because I was playing victim that I didn't need to play victim. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I was definitely in a wallowing moment. And there's a temptation to do that. When you've been a victim of anything, there is a temptation to want to draw out your story and get more people to listen and somebody to feel sorry, somebody to do something, which, you just want to feel doted on or feel important or whatever, the opposite of what you're feeling in that moment. And
yeah, you want the opposite.
Yeah. So yeah, I caught myself. I caught myself actually a couple times, when
And just to make it clear for those that don't know, that when you said the mold, can you explain just really briefly so people understand? Because I had never heard it before until, of course, I met you.
Yeah. Oh, so I was in a home that had black mold, and it was making me sick and almost killing me. And so we had to move. And so I've been getting treatment in the last 4 years for that. That's a quick summary.
That was good.
Yeah. So I could let that label me as I'm victim, I'm forever victim, and I can wallow in my story if I chose to, but I do not wish to. Been there, done that, not a good place to be.
You got the victory, absolutely.
And,
you need to look at it and say, okay, was this situation my fault? We talked about taking responsibility, but also, was this my fault? Okay, it was. It's okay to make mistakes. Lean forward into your failures. Failures should be a learning experience. So let's say, Renee, you thought, because it was on your list that the doctor gave you, that you could have red apples. So you know better, you should take a bite of a red apple and then wait and see what happens. But you decided it had been years since you had a red apple and you went ahead and ate the whole thing. Well, it was a fail, okay? Within 15 minutes, you knew you did not have red apples yet. It's on the list, but unfortunately, your body says no to red apples. Well, lean forward in that. If you were leaning forward in that and going, okay, that was a failure. I'm suffering right now with a rash, but leaning forward, you'd go, that's on my other list. I'll try it again in a year to see how things go.
And maybe a little less next time.
Yeah, you don't beat up yourself and go, next time it's a one bite situation. I know that. I'm not going to go ahead and get greedy and want the whole thing. The other is for me to make time to help others. I know when I was in that wallowing, when I was in that state, I didn't want to go out and be with others. I was, more in a depressed mode. Well, that's the time to get out. That's the time to go and serve at the food pantry. Whatever it is, you need to get out. You need to serve people. God created us to serve people. And it really helps our mind to stay healthy and be in a good place.
Well,
Sometimes it's a forced thing, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Even you talk about serving people, sometimes it's not even just the serving, it's just being willing to have a conversation when you go to the grocery store. Instead of being so self-focused, it's just being willing to have that conversation with somebody in front of you at the grocery store instead of being so into yourself and in that wallowing moment. I'm just saying, been there, done that. that it steals opportunities of relationship.
Yes. If you're in that mode and you see a mama struggling with her kids at the store or whatever it is, you're going to still be ahead of her in line instead of saying, you know what, go ahead of me. I had kids. They're all grown up now. Go ahead of me. I understand. You're doing a great job, Mom. Would I be in that mode to do it? No, but that's a serving for that person. Be willing to serve. And like you're saying, in all different manners, there's all different kinds of ways of doing it.
Yeah. I remember even being at an airport, being in my own zone. And airports are my playground. I'm just going to be honest. That's my playground to serve people and to have conversations and to love on them, see how I can pray for them. But when I'm drawn in, just dealing with Renee, I'm not in my playground. I'm just a pole, you know. I'm not doing any kind of serving, no kind of. And conversation is a way that I can serve. It's a natural way that
it is, absolutely. Because you can go up and talk to any stranger at all. You're like my husband. Absolutely.
Or just give an encouraging comment. But when it's so drawn in, it's so hard to think of what can I say to that person. I don't want to say nothing, you know. It's a very selfish place.
It is. It's self-serving for sure. If you do find yourself in that depressing situation, you could start making a list today and say, what are things I could do to change that? And if you can't come up with items, go ask some people that love you and say, I'm struggling to just get started writing what I can do to help me get out of this wallowing or depression or playing the victim type thing. I'm just needing some help here, and ask for their advice. Or go to a counselor as well. But ask yourself, see what you can do to change your focus off of you onto others, and practice listening to others. Like you said, you go to the airport, you talking with other people. I know that also includes you listening to them and then having real empathy for them. Yeah. Instead of them always, it comes to you. You need to start giving it back. Now, I believe you had a verse for us for today.
I do. Yep. Psalms. My nose is dripping. Psalm 10:14, and it's the first half of the verse. It says, but you, God, see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief, and you take it in hand. The victims commit themselves to you.
Handing our grief over to God, handing our sorrow, handing our troubles, even if it's, I don't know how we're going to pay this bill this month, or my heart is hurting so bad, God, I need you to carry me through. Whatever it is, He will. He says He has it. Yeah. That is such assurance.
And even as the person who's been sexually abused, and we were the victim, we're no longer, but we're former. It says the victims commit themselves to you. So yeah, it takes effort to go to God, but it says here that He sees our trouble and He considers our grief and He takes it in hand. He takes it. He offers to carry it for us. So we don't have to stay in what you were just listing, what we just talked about, all that negative, and stay in the wallowing. He can walk alongside us so we can lean in and move forward and heal and no longer be the victim.
I agree. Amen and amen.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Well, thanks for chatting with me about that today. I know we could have gone a lot deeper in a lot of the different situations, but I just want to lightly cover that a little bit.
Yeah, it was good. So not to play
Okay.
the victim. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.